What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this video, which is number 5 in this series on how to launch a podcast. If you haven't seen any of the other videos, go check them out. Video 1, I talk about why you should launch a podcast. In the second video, I talk about the prep and the legwork that you should do before jumping into a podcast. Number 3 is all about the equipment that you need to launch a podcast. In the last video, I talked about how to write a great script for your podcast. And in this video, and it is especially for those of you who are thinking of doing a podcast where you interview other people, this is about how you land that interview guest and things to keep in mind about why you may want to interview people. So maybe you're going into this thinking, no, I'm just gonna be the expert in my podcast. I'm never gonna have guests on it. It's just gonna be me who talks. Well, my question for you is, that's fine, and maybe you're somebody who is really recognized in your field and you already have an audience, and that might make perfect sense for you. But if you're not in that position, if you don't have an established audience already, how are people going to know about your podcast? How are they going to find it? If you're not really great at marketing that, or you're not going to put paid dollars behind it, or you don't have a strategy to get that out, you might run into some challenges. One of the benefits about interviewing other people on your podcast or on your YouTube interview series is that if you do a great interview, that person is going to want to share that interview with their audience, and you benefit from that right away. If I interview somebody else who has 5,000 Twitter followers and they tweet out that interview, all of a sudden my content, my podcast is being put in front of 5,000 people who otherwise wouldn't have ever heard of my particular podcast. So it is really beneficial to interview other people, to leverage their audience and just tap into their expertise. Sure, you may know a lot about a particular industry, but there's always somebody who maybe can bring something else to the table, and that is the beauty about podcasting. Even if you are the one who is the expert, maybe you can bring in a guest for part of your episode to talk about a particular point that you don't understand as well, or just to give the audience somebody else to listen to and a little bit of change of pace with the content. My first tip for reaching out to a guest is don't be scared or intimidated to reach out to somebody who you really want to interview. Sometimes we get nervous, or we have seen someone speak, for example, and we think, wow, that person's been on a stage public speaking at an event. There is no way they would ever be on my little podcast. But you would be surprised. Not everyone is going to say yes, but some people will, especially in this year of 2020 where so many events have been canceled or not happening. There are a lot of people who rely on speaking and getting their message out who haven't had the same platform that they typically have with so many events being canceled. And a lot of those individuals have been so great and so willing to go on some of the smaller podcasts and share their information because they want to help and they want to get their message out. And by your niche podcast, that might be an audience they otherwise couldn't tap into. So it's a bit of a win-win. And hey, if you get somebody who is a pretty well-known name on your podcast or on your YouTube interview show, that is going to instantly help your content. The thing that's going to give you the best success at getting people on your podcast or interview show is doing a little bit of research about them and then sending out a really thoughtful message. And perhaps you don't have the person who you want to interview their email. There are so many ways to reach people these days, through Twitter direct messages, through Instagram direct messages, Facebook messages. There are often ways to find online how to reach certain people that you want to interview for your episode. And if they say no, or perhaps they're too busy, you can always say, hey, thanks so much for your consideration. Maybe I'll follow up in 6 months. And if you have a bit more time there, then awesome. And you'd be surprised again by actually taking that step and following up down the road, how often people will be willing to go on your episode. A separate strategy for getting guests is to get those people who you already have some relationship with. Some people, depending on what their business is, they will interview local people in the community who are maybe influential in certain places. I have seen a lot of realtors who have interviewed various businesses in their community, and they create it as this fun 20 Favorite Businesses in 20 Days series, whether it's a podcast or a YouTube series, and they go around and they interview different people from the community. In those cases, those individuals are going to be happy to be on your episode because it's almost in a way free content advertising for them. They get to talk about why their business is so great, but you also get interesting content because you can find out the story behind the business, and people who live in your community are going to find that content really interesting because it might be their favorite coffee shop and you're interviewing the owner, but they never knew the story of how that coffee shop actually came into existence. And it's through your content you can help tell those stories. So once you've secured the guest, whether it's somebody you already know or it's somebody lofty who you never thought, maybe they have 200,000 Twitter followers and you're so excited, your mind is blown that they have agreed to be on your podcast, that is awesome. Congratulations. Now you want to make sure that the guest is prepared. I like to give them a bit of a heads up of what to expect on the episode. So if you're doing a live podcast or a live interview series, that is another level of intimidation compared to if it is pre-recorded. Pre-recorded gives the guest that feeling of a bit of a safety net. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. Simply make sure that your guest knows what they are coming into. Also, you may want to talk about what sorts of equipment are going to be required. With one of the podcasts that I host, we use a website called Zencastr to do interviews. Through the other podcast, we use Zoom. Regardless of which platform we're using, it's important that the guest knows what to expect when they use that platform. And so many of us have used Zoom now, I think most of us get it by this point, but many haven't used Zencastr. They need to know that they need headphones for it to keep that audio from coming through and being heard in the computer. They also need a half-decent microphone if it's possible. Now we can make most setups work, but you want to give them a heads up. Give them little reminders, like if they're using the Apple headphones with a microphone here and they have long hair, you want to make sure that your hair isn't brushing up against that microphone, because in a podcast, sound is all we have. And if you have some sort of distracting, scratchy noise or something like that, that is going to be painful to listen to if you are the audience. So you want to make sure you're setting your guest up for success. After the interview is complete, you also want to make sure that they know what to expect. When is this episode going to be coming out? How are you going to inform them when the episode is out? I like to always get a photo of the guest, so get them to send me their favorite professional photo or mugshot, and I will incorporate that with a few photos or episode art so that when I launch the podcast, I also have something for other social media networks where I can be sharing that content out, telling people that the podcast is live, and also send that content to the guest, because at the end of the day, we want our interviewees to be promoting the episode just as much as we are, because that is going to be another audience that we can reach and who can come across our content, which we really benefit from in the end. I hope this 5th video has been beneficial for you on what to think about before you reach out to interview guests. Make sure and check out the other videos in the series. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure you subscribe and turn on that notifications bell so you never miss a video. I'm going to be doing more of these 8-part communication series throughout the year, so it's something you don't want to miss. Regardless, thank you so much for checking out this video, and I hope I see you soon.